So hold on, I'd like to call the special meeting for the Board of Education goals to order. This is July 13th and the time is 7:04. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Now we're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Willett.
No problem.
Okay, so the one thing I want to discuss before we dive right in is Dr. Willett had sent an email, and I do think he sent it to leadership, and I do think it's something that the whole board should discuss. And what he was talking about was, how we're in a pandemic right now and having like Board of Ed priorities versus like a goal. So more like having the health and safety of the students and staff, the continuation of quality instruction regardless of method, ongoing communication. So things of that nature, which I do think is important to have, but I still do think that we should have goals in there. So whether we have like a hybrid model or have, something along those lines, but I just kind of wanted to touch base with all the members and just see what your thoughts are. So I'll just kind of start going around, I guess. So we have...
Actually, if I could jump in for a second, because
Sure.
it sort of came out of a conversation with Dr. Willett. The other thing that was in my mind as we left the last meeting was that you're in the middle of the portrait of a graduate, and that should be done in 2 or 3 months, I believe. And that formulating goals without that work, to me, sets that work aside almost a year, because you won't really be able to incorporate that into goals you've already set. And so it kind of made sense to me that if you postpone the goal setting till you have that research, that information, it's kind of like a strategic plan, creating the goals before you've done the scan, the environmental scan. So that was the first thing in my mind. And secondly, it's going to be hard enough trying to figure out what's going to happen when they don't have a clue. And that's why it sort of was like, and priorities don't have to be just maintain quality education. It could be emphasize this, emphasize that, but understanding that the metrics might be different, because at literally a moment's notice, anytime between now and next June, you could get a directive from the State Department or the governor that says, oh, forget everything you've been doing for the last 3 months. We're going to do it this way tomorrow. So that was what sort of led me and Dr. Willett to the conversation about how do we best use your expertise and community guidance leadership to make sure that staff has what it needs this year and to get through as best as possible while still maintaining that sort of policy directive, that leadership role. I'm here to do whatever you want to do. So I don't have a dog in this hunt, but it just seemed like with those two things sort of happening at the same time, I wondered how valuable this is 3 months from now. And that's the only reason I bring this up. And I also want to hear what everybody has to say.
Yeah, no, I'm just writing a couple of quick notes. I think, like I said, I think it's an important discussion to be had with all board members and just kind of really go through and just see where everybody's head is at. I mean, honestly, like you would think that health and safety of students and staff wouldn't need to be said, that would just be something that we make sure we do. But I do think there is, it should be in the forefront for parents who are worried about sending their children to school with the regulations. Like, this way it is like right there to say that is one of our main factors that we want to make sure and ensure, and this is what we're doing, and that's why we're here.
Yep.
So that's kind of where my mind was at with it when I read through the email. But like I said, let's just go through. So Jacob, you're in the block over here. So
okay. So we're talking about kind of goals versus priorities. I guess the way I have is like, I don't see why we can't make some goals that are about safety and reopening. I think that, like I said, SMART goal emphasis, that you kind of set specific and measurable goals, and or maybe the staff do it if it's a more technical area. And I think it's an important job for the board to be checking in on that regularly and making sure that that's all completed. I think we can kind of be specific about what we want as far as student safety and making sure that we're continuing education.
Okay. Dana.
Hi, everybody. I've been going back and forth with this in my mind on so many levels. It's quite daunting, and I don't know if there's any right answer, to be honest, that any of us can possibly fathom. But some of the things that have been going through my mind are not just the student safety. I mean, of course, student safety is paramount, right? And that's been, forefront in everybody's mind, and that's been what we've been really talking about, which is fantastic. That's our job. It's to protect the students and guide them and help educate them and give them the resources so that they have all the resources at their disposal. But then, I think, and I go through, what about all those educators? And all those educators that are exposed to all those students, and all those educators that have their families at home. And again, this is all conversations that I know that the reopening committee is having and going to continue to have. But you look at those specials educators, the physical education, the interventionists, the social workers, the nurses, who aren't necessarily confined into a room with X amount of students in a given day, or whatever that looks like. And then what happens when that spirals? And I think that, and first of all, I'm very appreciative of the survey. The survey was fantastic. It was very thorough. It was very direct, to be honest. But and I'm sorry, my children are in the background, but and I know I can't necessarily reach out to teachers directly as from Board of Ed member, but I'd be interested in a survey or a survey of the staff on how they feel and how they're ready to go. That would be something that would be on a goal of mine to put on our agenda to discuss as well, on how that looks for the folks that are supposed to be, supplying our children with this education and this educational support, not just Dr. Willett and his team in the administrative aspects, but the folks that are in those classrooms and in those hallways. And how does that look? There's so many things.
We did do a survey of the staff too.
Okay, great.
So that'll be presented tomorrow night at TRAC.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I mean, that's just kind of been, and again, I went through the information from the commissioner and listening to information daily. It continues to evolve, I should say. So I just think we just need to be very flexible and ready to kind of take a hard left if we need to take a hard left, I guess is what we should say, because I don't want us to be fixed on an eye on a prize when that prize might not necessarily be realistic. We have to be able to, like, you're creating game plans with the reopening committee, and you have to have plan A, B, C, D, and E, and we have to be ready. Like, plan A is in effect, okay, boom, we have to go to plan D. And I think we need to be realistically optimistic, but realistic, and do our best to do what's right, and what's safe and what's secure and what's going to impact our children and our staff emotionally, educationally, and safe. I mean, again, you're not going to make everybody happy. I don't think there's any right answer. I don't know what the answer is right now, but I definitely think that we need to be able to be flexible and redirect if needs be. I don't know if that answered your question, Ashley. I know I rambled quite a bit.
I do think, let's keep going and hear what we have, but I understand where you're coming from. So, Rini, I'm just going through my block. So if your block is lined up, you're going next.
Okay, so I wasn't at the last meeting regarding what, the discussion around Portrait of a Graduate. I'm, kind of happy to, take some direction from Nick and Dr. Willett if they feel like completing that needs to be before a complete goal setting. I think, though, that, for me, the health and safety of the students and is always part of what the board has on their plate at all times. However, I would say that we could potentially just add a goal that, kind of commits to providing a quality education to our students in any way that it needs to be delivered. provided, given the current circumstances, and with the health and safety of the students and staff foremost in that plan or in that goal. Something kind of like that we could have as at least one goal, even if I'm not sure if we're going forward with, total goal setting or not, but I do think that certainly has been a goal and should be a goal that we have. I think for me, if we're putting off goal setting, specific goal setting, and this is a little bit, it's not off topic, but to me, some level of ending some of the divisiveness on this board would be a goal for me. I would love to see an end to some of the eye rolling and the, muttering under the breath and the Facebook backstabbing and some of that kind of stuff, because I don't feel like it really moves forward the goals of the board, and it doesn't allow us to really work together very well at all. We're working together when we're here, and then people scatter and things happen, and it's disappointing. And I really had hoped for a different experience and a different way of working. So for me, that would be the number one goal, is if we can somehow get to that point where we're truly working together, whether we put off true, board goal setting or not. That for me is the top thing that I would like to see happen.
Okay, thank you. Lord.
So I had a couple things. I appreciate what Nick and Dr. Willett said about the portrait of a graduate, because I think if we understand that more and we work through that, and as they work through it, we could set goals with that. With that being said, I'm 100% on board with measurable goals. I did do some thinking, and I thought that in the future we could focus a little bit more on student achievement, and whether they're doing distance learning or whether they're physically in the classrooms. I think we could set some measurable goals there. I also think that, I'm sorry, I'm reading here something I typed up earlier. In terms of supporting our teachers and staff, I think that the track committee is on track, if you will, to support them in the short term. But how can we, I'm thinking more in long-term goals, how do we support them in the long term? And just, in the back of my mind, a goal of mine that's always, since I got elected a few years ago, was to do a staff survey, maybe through the unions or wherever, however that happens to go. But just figured I'd throw that out there, that it would be interesting to see what they have to say.
So if I could just ask Krista, because I'm taking notes, and after I'm going to ask to share my screen so I could share them with you. Christine, are you sort of talking like a climate survey then for staff? More than like the I believe they just did was probably more about what are your intentions for the school?
Well, we do a survey of staff at the end of every year as well. Although at the end of this year we did not, but every year we do a survey, a large set of surveys of all school building staff, parents, and I think that's the two big groups: staff, staff, parents, and students at the middle school, high school level, and staff and parents at the BGP and TIS. Yeah.
So maybe if that's already being done, just including the board and the results. That'd be an easy one.
We probably, unfortunately, this whole year got kind of whacked out, but yes, we definitely do. Like at the end, I posted all up there. And part of the website, if you go there for survey data, you'll see like there's all these things listed. That's typically what we do, is something like that. But we weren't able to do it this year.
Understandably.
Not the same way, at least. Yeah.
Okay, Griffin?
All right, so I'm kind of taking it all in. I do kind of agree with what everybody's saying. I do think that the priority should definitely be something we discuss, but I don't think that we should just completely kind of ignore the goals. I thought what Rini was saying was very interesting. I think that it's important. You know, we've been at this now for what, 8 months? Been that long? 9, 10 months? I think we have to get some of these goals figured out. And absolutely, I think that we need to talk about some of the stuff that's kind of, I think, stopping us from really moving forward as a cohesive board so that we can work together. And absolutely, safety should be a priority. And I forget now who said it. I apologize, but that's something that was, I think, a board given, no matter what was going on, is the safety of all of our students. So I don't think that will change, even with the pandemic. We know that their safety is going to be a priority, but as well as figuring out how to, give them the education that they deserve. And I think that even if we come up with some of those goals, they might have to be tweaked a little bit as far as how to obtain those goals will have to be tweaked given the pandemic circumstances. But I think at the end of the day, the goals should probably be pretty similar as far as that's concerned. So I think that we could probably move forward with those goals right now, with the understanding that we might have to kind of tweak exactly how to get there during this pandemic. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, good. Kate.
So since I feel like I've been called out, Rini, I wanna address what you said. If I, have rolled my eyes or whatever, nonsense you guys want to say or whatever, I want to just call this out and just say this is because this board started off not listening. We started off not listening. There was a clear plan back in November for you guys to seize power, and you got it. So yay, you got it. So, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this is all hunky-dory and that, oh yeah, that sounds great. Let's work on our relationship. I want this to work. I have a vested interest in making sure that our Board of Education works. I've got 2 kids in the school, and education is my life. So I get a little saucy, and that's me. And, if I roll my eyes, it's because I can't get through to some of you. So in terms of all of that business, I also want to bring up, since you brought it up, Rini, after a couple meetings, I got some nasty emails from some people, from a spouse of a member of the Board of Education. When I tried to address it, it got, blown off by our chairperson. So that's very clear to me that my voice really kind of doesn't matter all that much. And we want to do something different, and if we want to actually hear everybody on this, I'm good with that. I will listen to you all. I will. But, to kind of come at it sideways like that, I don't like that. Let's just be honest with each other. Let's work for the kids. Let's do what's right. In the muttering under my breath, I took care of that. I don't know what else you're talking about. So I'm going to just let that go. As far as opening schools and doing the goals and all this kind of stuff, the more flexible we can be, the better it's going to be for our schools and for our kids and for Dr. Willett, who is doing 3 jobs in 1. So whatever is going to be best, whatever is going to be using our time the most wisely, I'm behind that. That's really all I have to say about that.
Okay. And I'm sorry.
Ashley, I'm sorry. When everybody's done, I would just like to say something else. And all of our hands were raised, so you let me know, and I would just like to.
I just want to address Kate for a minute, because I'm sorry. I mean, I feel as though I did write back on everything that you had sent to me, and I'm sorry that you don't feel like you were listened to, but I did give you my perspective of what happened and how things are going. So I'm sorry that you feel that it just didn't agree with what you had to say. Go ahead. Dana.
Sorry, and I didn't want to mess protocol, but some of our hands are up and some aren't. So my apologies.
No problem.
One is, I know I rambled a little bit about the goal setting in the very beginning of the meeting when you asked. There's so much going through my mind with everything that's going on with, in-person graduation, with going back to school, the safety of our kids, the uncertainty of COVID period. But I couldn't agree more. I think it was Christine who said something about, we definitely need to make sure we make our goals, because no matter what, as a board, our whole purview is going to be, we're going to have set goals, right? And are they going to change based on what's going on, or are they going to acclimate based on what's going on? So I think that's very important. But to address the teamwork, I know that I can't speak for everybody, but from the people that I've met and the in-person conversations that we have had, I think I hope that all of us came in with wanting to do what's right by Tolland Public School system, wanting to do what's right by Tolland Public School students, and wanting to do what's right by Tolland Public School staff. I think we'd be remiss to say that we all aren't very strong personalities. We have a very strong group of personalities, and I think it's going to take time for us to really work together and really listen to each other and really hear each other. Yes, we come from differing opinions, because if everybody felt the same way as I did, or if everybody felt the same way as Ashley did or Christine did, and we were all around people that were exactly the same as us, it would be a very scary world, right? So I think that we need to take a minute and listen to each other and hear those diverse thoughts and hear those differences of opinion, because that's going to only help educate ourselves and educate each other, and help make us stronger. So I'm going to commit to doing my part. I've been trying to do my part. I really will say that I've been trying to stay away from the garbage of social media, other than just putting some facts on there. Yes, it is very emotional. I couldn't agree more. I have 2 kids invested in the school district. There's many of these folks. Jacob just got out of the school district. Christina's kids are just going in. Christine's kids are on their way out. We all are invested in it, and I get it. And we really need to do what's right by Tolland Public School system. And it's our job, whether Democratic, Republican, independent, unaffiliated, whatever, we're here to represent all those students in our town, and all those families in our town, and all those people that aren't parents and families in town, So you have my commitment. This board has my commitment. But I would almost challenge everybody else to have that commitment, because Rini, I hear what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying, but I don't think it's just one person. I don't think it's all 9. But I think everybody, I know. I just see it. People can get easily sucked in, and social media is a great source for information. But then when you get sucked into the garbage, we lose it all in the minutia of what we're really trying to do. And I want us to not lose that minutia of what we're trying to do. And so, but it's not just one person, and it's not just 9 people. We're a team, and I want us to be a team. So, you guys, I can speak for myself, and you have my commitment. And I hope I have the rest of the squares commitment. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Ashley, if I could just say something.
Yep.
I didn't say anybody's name. I never accused one person. We've all had things that we've said or done along the way, perhaps, that could be construed as not great. But I do see, I just feel like we need to work together. That's really what I'm saying. And because one person or a couple people feel a particular way that this is right, sometimes you have to just compromise, and we have to then move on and not be angry and not, I'm just saying, at the end of the day, I didn't specify one person. And so I'm putting that out there. I agree with Dana. We all need to work together. And that is ultimately what I was saying. It's disappointing to me to be on a board that seems so split sometimes. And some of the things that go on are just surprising to me. I've been on a board before in another town, and I never experienced any of this. And I don't understand it. And I don't know why we can't get past it. I understand that maybe the election results didn't come out the way some had hoped, but that doesn't mean that we're not all good people and that we're not all invested in what is best for the Tolland School District. I may not have kids in the Tolland School District, but I live here. This is my town too. It doesn't mean that I'm less invested and less caring than anyone else here. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Rini. Just to review here, what everyone was saying is to get back to this, I do think that we'll set goals. I do think that we all need to have the idea that they can be tweaked and that they can be flexible, because without having that, I think we're just not putting ourselves in the right position. I think the way of handling the health and safety of students and things of that nature is to make it a goal. That way it does combine everything together. Obviously, we know that Portrait of the Graduate's not completed quite yet. So I do think that we may have to revisit some ideas that we may come up with. I'm not sure. And so that was kind of my takeaway from everybody, but I do feel as though that the goals do need to be set. And we just need to, once again, have that flexibility and know that they might have to get tweaked along the way. So Nick, I don't know if you want to share your notes.
Well, actually, Dr. Willett, if you could let me share my screen, I can put this up on the screen. I've been keeping a Word document going.
Sure. I'm going to make you a co-host if I can. Would that be okay?
All right.
All right.
Sure.
It's a privilege I don't even get.
Yeah, or maybe just a host. I'm gonna make you a host, and then you can hand it back to me when you're done. How's that?
When you ask.
All right. There we go.
So now I should be able to, oh, it's down here, share screen. Let's see if we can. Now, can you see a Word document?
Yep.
Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes.
I tried to use big print. It's still not really big, but actually we can do whatever we want, can't we? We can make that 20. All right, so one thing I would suggest as, and I want you, well, you know what? I'm not going to say anything. I want you all to talk first. Several of you talked about wanting goals. What I'd like, I guess, to start with is a conversation about where you think some of those priorities need to be. If you were going to do, some of you probably even have draft goals with you, but let's start to brainstorm what you think the priorities ought to be right now. And let's see if there are some commonalities or some areas that seem pretty obvious for a goal, or if there's some that maybe need a little more fleshing out. So if anybody wants to jump in and start talking about what they see as priorities. I shouldn't use that word because we sort of dispense with the idea of priorities. I'm sorry.
So we'll go to Jacob first. He's got his little blue hand raised.
Perfect.
Okay. So a couple things. So first of all, when we were going around, for some reason, I misunderstood things that we were just talking about in relation to the idea of COVID goals. So I just wanted to mention a general one that I think we need to work on regardless of COVID. I think that it's really important that we consider ways to maybe do things efficiently, given kind of the economic circumstances. You know, the cost, I think, of getting a good education continues to rise, but, you know, the people aren't getting any richer. We need to figure out a way to, you know, maybe bring some money into the school district. I know Dr. Willett's come up with ideas such as like the Tolland Business Academy and things like that. And I think that's something that the board should continue to work on. As far as priorities, I think that's it. That goal right there is really important. And then obviously, we're given COVID, I would say student safety and making sure that continuity of learning works well are top priorities for me.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm not seeing any blue hands up, people.
Or even hands.
Yeah. Rini?
I'll raise my hand.
Okay. We're going down. We have blue hands now. So let's go to the top to the bottom. Rini.
Okay. I like I feel like it's important that we do focus on the measurable goals of the student of student achievement. We haven't really talked much about student achievement since I've been on the board. So I would like to, that's over on the other page already. So I'm just kind of throwing my support behind that and supporting the teachers and staff in the long term. I also believe that we should have a goal around looking for efficiencies and other sources of revenue so that we can maintain and or grow our programs. We need money to do that. And we know we're not getting any more from the state. We can only tax people just so much. So I feel like if we can go in that direction and finding other sources of revenue, whether those be money from students coming in who are attending our school, or things like that, the business academy, whatever it may be, that those are ways that we would actually be able to move the district forward and hopefully restore programs that we've lost maybe, or move forward. I definitely support those, as well as obviously the board working well together.
Okay. Plord?
I was just going to say, I don't know how, if we put this under priorities or under goals, or how we would make this measurable, but supporting Dr. Willett's Portrait of a Graduate work. I would add that to, I guess it would be a goal in the sense that after that's completed, we review our goals and make sure that they align, or we put the final goal setting session off until, that's done as suggested. Safety of students is obviously, like you said, it's something that it's always been at the forefront, but during COVID, I think it is important to list. Sorry, I'm just reading. And the goal to provide quality education regardless of how it has to be delivered. I'd like to know how we could make that measurable. If we're in an online program, how do we measure its success versus a hybrid model versus a full going back to school model? And I don't know what the answer is to that. That's probably on Dr. Willett, but I wouldn't know how to make that measurable. But I know that with distance learning, I just didn't know how some people were doing and how we measured that.
Are you all set? You're muted. Okay, Dina.
Hi, Nick, I'm sorry, I love the big font, but can you zoom out a little? Please. So I can
You hit
see.
escape. If you hit escape, Dana, it should shrink it a bit.
Okay, good. Okay, I got it. Thank you. No, perfect. Okay.
Oh, no, I can't.
I have a new iPad, so I'm learning anyways, maybe I need to go back to school to learn how to use the technology. No, I think I think a lot of these things are that I definitely think that we need to make sure that we streamline and take care of and not push anything off, like safety of students, safety of parents, safety of staff, provide quality education. I know someone used the word efficiency, and I apologize for not remembering who that was. I think we need to look at efficiency through our administrative office as well. I think that needs to be something of a goal that we discuss. Specifically, we always talk about Dr. Willett doing 3 or 4 different jobs, and how really efficient is that when someone is honing multiple roles, and how impactful can that person be in the role that they need to be. I just think that needs to be something of a efficiency of administration and support of administration should be a goal of ours in a conversation. And there was also about tuition, and I guess this is more of a question that we could probably circle back. But we're talking about free. So we're talking about free public education, but when you were talking about tuition, are you talking about, the programs that we have with children coming in? And I don't know who mentioned that. So I guess that was just more of my question. Programs from children coming in from out of town to our school system. Is that what we were talking about there? with tuition students?
Yes. Or
Okay.
what
Okay.
was-
I was just trying to, I didn't remember what that was. So, yeah, I think that's been a great program that Dr. Willett, how many years ago did that program start?
It was probably about 3 years ago. And
3 years.
there's a set of programs. There are cost avoidance programs
Right.
and tuition bearing programs. So there's a couple of them in there too.
Then I'd like to throw that cost avoidance programs when we're not outsourcing our students out to.
Yeah, like the
But I definitely I know you start the children coming in at the lower grade level so they can grow through our school system. If I'm not correct, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, major initiatives, just really quick, are the ABA program for autism. That's a big cost avoidance, but it's also quality of ed. LEAP, TTA, Transition Academy. Those have helped you avoid sending a lot of children out for outplacements or Horizon programs and things that you used to send kids out for.
Okay. I think that definitely needs, and when it said tuition students, I didn't know what that umbrella was. So I kind of wanted to expand on that umbrella. So thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Willett.
Sure.
And then I think some of the questions would be, again, focus on measurable goals. I think that's absolutely 100% in student achievement. I definitely think that needs to be on our list. I know that probably looks a little different right now due to COVID, since official tests and such haven't really been instituted and implemented since March or so with everything going on. So I guess, and I don't know how that looks in COVID world, whether we're in school or half and half or all online, but figuring out how to focus on those measurable goals and how to actually have results of those, I guess, in whatever plan we're in, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
I follow you.
Thank you for understanding my brain, Ashley. But that's kind of where I was going, because we really need to think about our goals and whatever our school system looks like and how we measure that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Kate?
So 2 things, measurable goals. When we talk about measurable goals, we can also be looking at culture and climate data, satisfaction of students, teachers, and parents. That's other, measurable items. I also think that we absolutely need to have a diversity and inclusion goal. I have an example here. It's Quinnipiac's create a diverse and inclusive community where every member is acknowledged, respected, and has the necessary resources to thrive, both individually and together. It's just an example. There's about 1 billion other diversity and inclusion statements out there. This would also, include racial diversity, inclusion, all of those things. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Plord. No, not.
I think I raised my hand by accident after I lowered it.
You already went. You already got a turn.
I'm good.
All right. So I don't know if anybody noticed, I got kicked out when we were on number 2.
Oh, no.
I'm usually on top of it.
Number 9. So I just wanted to say you guys all did a great job. These are some great goals. The only thing I want to say is something that I've always noticed about the prior goals is that we didn't really talk about, I'm sorry, I'm pulling my big binder because I don't have enough room on my desk here. The prior goals, the one thing that I noticed was we didn't talk about the curriculum, the support and encourage curriculum development and teaching and learning best practice until goal number 4. So that's always something that stuck with me, that goal number 1 was the alternatives to outplacement. So I guess the only kind of thing I want to say is I'd like to see the first goal be very student-centered. So that is just kind of what I've always noticed. So I absolutely agree with all of these other things, but I just would like the curriculum, the student, the education piece to be the first goal.
As a facilitator, I want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Important too.
That's all I have, Ashley.
That's all you have. Okay.
That's it. Good job, guys. While I was kicked off.
I'm sorry that I didn't even notice, Griffin.
That's
Because
okay.
I'm
It's
usually
become a
pretty good.
common occurrence lately with these meetings. I don't know why.
So can I just pop in about the alternative thing?
Yeah.
The first, I think that was probably there. I mean, historically speaking, on the board, there was millions of dollars that the board was spending and sending students out, and so that was an attempt to really focus in on the cost avoidance measures. So that, just historically speaking, I just wanted you guys to understand maybe why that was there and why it was at number one. But I agree with you, Christine. It needs to be about what the kids are, the portrait of the graduate. What are they getting as students of Tolland schools? So, but that is why, because it was that cost effectiveness, and because of the building up of all the programs that Dr. Willett just listed, we were able to recoup. I think the figure was about 1.2 million. I don't know for sure. Dr. Willett and his staff have those numbers, but that's why that was there.
Okay. Nick, I did have a quick question for you.
Sure.
When a board member is saying that we should be supporting the portrait of a graduate and use that as a goal, but if our goals are supposed to align with the portrait of a graduate, how does that come into play?
Well, so here's where we get a little confusing, because you can have a goal for the board, which would be ensure the completion and adoption and support of portrait of a graduate, versus a district goal that might say we are going to follow the recommendations of portrait of a graduate. For instance, if there's something about citizenship that we're going to support or set ourselves a goal. You were talking about measurable goals, for example. So in my mind, it's harder to set a measurable goal about portrait of a graduate other than seeing it to completion and continuing that conversation about how do we incorporate that into the work we do. The measure is, do we do it or not? One of the questions I guess I would ask back is, because what I heard a lot of was continuity of instruction, in continuing offering high quality instruction, teaching and learning. The question, I guess, in my mind, are we really, and this is a question I'm asking you, as we try to focus on what the work needs to look like, is the focus going to be maintaining high quality instruction through all these confusing times, or picking a few areas of student achievement and saying, this is what we want to focus on? So one would be measuring the effectiveness of the teaching and learning directly, let's say. The other still is connected to teaching and learning, because if you have no student growth, then we're not effectively teaching. And that's not a criticism of anyone. It's just the outcome of effective teaching is learning, is better learning. And so I guess the question is, as you think about this year, I think it puts a different challenge on Dr. Willett and his staff in terms of, we want to see a continuation of math instruction or reading and writing, or or just the social emotional. I mean, nobody's really brought that up tonight, but that's what in the state plan that they put out last week, that was their primary concern, even to focusing on the first day. They had more information in that document about what they were looking for the first day of school than they did about anything else. So I guess I'm sort of dumping this back on all of you to say, because I don't think we're ready to start talking about what we want to measure yet, but what is it that is going to make this a successful year? Is it, if we're out of school next week and in school in December, but then we have an outbreak, and so half the school is home on quarantine, how do we maintain the quality of what those kids are, I was going to say subjected to, that's not fair, provided with, so that whether it's online learning, whether it's in-person learning, whether you've got to regroup the children into smaller groups, larger groups, cohorts, how do we make sure that however we have these children in front of us, that what instruction they get is out of this world, or at least promotes growth? Because that's the measurable for students, is did they achieve at a level where they went from point A to point B? And I probably would defer to staff to decide what point A and B may look like with guidance from the board out of what's acceptable. But that given the challenges, and I probably have preferences, but I'm not going to tell you what they are, but I want you to talk about what your priority might be. Is it providing teachers with the materials, tools, and professional development to be successful in their work, regardless of how they do it? Or is it to set some standards for the students and challenge the staff to work on that? I don't know if I said that well, but I'm going to throw that back out to all of you.
Well, it's a good conversation to be had, because I don't know if just the point of creating this would be one of those goals that we have that flexibility, because we don't know what's going to happen. So I think we have to find a way that it is kind of fluid with what's happening with the situation, because it'd be great to have, give the teachers the success and the tools, materials, everything that they need to make bright shiny stars. But at the same time, if you have everyone home learning, because everyone in 10% or 20%, whatever, I saw some note that if it was that many kids, then you'd have to close down. So then you're just happy that the students are learning online. So I think that we need to somehow, when we craft this, that it needs to have flexibility within it. So that's my take on it. But little blue hands, anybody? Kate?
I do just want to also raise the issue that we have very few support staff, and I don't know about anybody else, but like part of the push to go back is that, the American Pediatric Association has gone back and forth on it, but part of it is about that socialization piece for the kids. Part of the reason that folks want to get them back. So there has been a serious problem in Tolland with social emotional status of students, as we have seen. And if we aren't also, thank you for bringing that up, Nick. It's not that I forgot about it. It's just I didn't think about it, because it is, if you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of need, and if you don't have those very bottom couple of safety and security, physiological needs, then you're not going to be able to learn. You're not going to be able to grow. And so it's like the cornerstone of your ability to be successful as a human. And we've had some serious problems in Tolland with that. So we do need to address that. And that's really all I have to say.
Kate, if I could ask a follow-up question for you, is that something that happened since March, or is that something that's been a recurring issue?
It hasn't happened since March, but I think that, between students being at home, plus, there were a couple of suicides last year of young people, and the committee members would know more specifics than I, because my kids are a little bit younger, but just, deaths in the community of young folks, and then a couple of suicides. It's just really, for a small town, there seems to be a high need.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Jacob?
Yeah, I would agree with Kate up on that, that mental health and issues related to substance abuse and things like that should definitely be a priority of ours, especially given the circumstances. I know that if Karen was here, she'd talk a bit about SRBI, I believe has to do with that. I've got their acronym correct. And I know the town is also working up on doing something like that that's community involved. And if we can be involved up in that or partner with them, I think that would be to our benefit. And then I believe you, Nick, said something a bit about, is our focus more about just trying to maintain present quality or improve up in certain areas? I think that's a good question. I think it'd be easier to figure that out once we kind of maybe have our portrait of a graduate and see what areas we have an improvement with. Right now, I guess my feeling is that because this whole COVID thing has been such a enormous disruption to services right now, I think we need to make sure that we are providing at least something that was the same as before all this happened, and then we can see where we want to go. I think there are definitely areas where we can improve, but I think that if we don't have those bases covered, we're going to be starting out up on kind of uneven terrain.
I'm giving people a chance to think. This is very different. This is the first time I've done something like this on a little screen. It's a little disconcerting. So thanks for your patience.
Dana has her hand up. We'll go to Dana.
Hi. I think something we need to be cognizant of is, what are we at? July, what's today's date?
July
13th? 13th. So we're what, 6 weeks out, 5 weeks out from when school starts, right? Something that I'm just a bit apprehensive about, and we need to keep, on top of mind is how many of us are on this meeting right now? There's maybe 15 people, give or take, and we're in a Zoom. So I think that we talk about the social emotional, and I 100% agree wholeheartedly with socialization and social emotional. And I think that, we definitely have some folks that being home and being in quarantine is definitely making an impact even more so than would. And there's some people that have been pushed even further than they would be. So I think Kate's right on. But I also think that we're talking about the safety of our students, and we're having a meeting not even in person. I just think that needs to be a conversation because, really thinking about it, are we 5 weeks away from populating a building? It's something, and again, I don't know if this is goal setting, but yeah, you need those kids. The kids need their friends. The kids need their teachers. They need that one-on-one conversation. They need that support. Those children who need those social workers and their interventionists and the sped students with that one-on-one is so critical. It's not the same as a Zoom. That needs to be top of mind, and that needs to be forefront. And how that looks, I don't know. It's just something that I definitely think we need to have in the back of our minds that we need to talk about. But student safety and the social, it's not just education anymore. We're helping, our schools are providing the whole person, right? And how does that look? I just wanted to throw that out there. That's all I have.
If we were doing board goals instead of district goals, and I think the conversation sort of wrapping around several things could come out of this still, that one of the things I think I'd be hearing more is how you need to be able to communicate to the community, keep them apprised of what's going on, keep them comfortable with where you're going, which means sharing information as best you can. And that is challenging when there's different expectations. Some people can't wait for the kids to get back to school because I got to go to work. That's a legitimate concern. That's why if I step back for a second and talk about the priorities, to say to your community, these are resolute, that we will not do anything that compromises the health and safety of our children or our staff, that we will not provide anything that risks setbacks in children's social emotional well-being. So I think you can still do that in your goals if you say that we want to ensure and we'll support measures this year that support the social emotional well-being of our students and staff, because they're feeling the pinch too. That could be a goal. Now, how is it measured? I'm not sure. That's why I'm not sure how far we get with, although again, maybe that's where you go back to your administration and say, here's our goal. We need you to come together with your staff and develop a plan and tell us how you'll do it and what it's going to look like. Because I think that's the solution. The board should be in the business of establishing what the issues are, what the problems are that be solved, and letting your staff work on the solutions for you. And sharing with you, how will we know if we're being successful or not? That's got to be part of the plan, of the goals. Are there other areas? Because I'm trying to sort of highlight the ones that may require some. I'm going to do these in a different color. There's a few of them that really talk about more revenue. It's about resources. That's a purple. Culture and climate probably could be sort of thought about in the same vein as social emotional, maybe not. I throw that out for you to think about. But if we're looking for a climate of learning or that supports learning, that would have to include social, emotional, mental, physical health of children. Stop me if I'm going off course, but I'm trying to sort of consolidate these ideas for you.
Nick, I'd like if you wouldn't mind highlighting diversity and inclusion. I think with culture and climate right now, specifically in continuing developing that education and that resource for all students. I think it's paramount that everybody gets the well-rounded education on all aspects. And with everything that's going on right now, I think that needs to be on top of mind as well. Thank you.
So several of you talked about the idea of the board working better together. And I'm not thinking necessarily of this as a district goal, but perhaps a commitment by you to consider doing board evaluation sometime in the future, which could focus on how the board could work more effectively together. You might want to make that a goal and just say the board wants to make a goal of working to develop a better sense of team. They have to be your words, obviously, but that wouldn't necessarily doesn't have to be a goal, but you could walk out of this meeting with a commitment to let's agree to continue this work. The advantage to doing some of this in self-evaluation is that by law, you could do that in executive session. You don't have to, but boards often feel that it's a benefit because you can be more frank and have more constructive conversations in a closed loop. But, I do them either way. If you wanted us to help you with that, that's something that the board could make a decision on how they want to see that. But there is a benefit to having frank conversations without a camera on.
Nick, we've got Tony Holt. He's a member that's probably waiting in the waiting room. You're the host. You got to let him.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Got to let him in. If you want to transfer,
I think I admitted him.
You did. Okay. All right. There he is. He's in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say he's connecting. So.
Yeah.
Welcome, Tony.
Hello, Tony.
Thank you. My apologies for my tardiness.
They're almost done. They couldn't wait for you.
But I'm right on time.
Are you on the something that you can view the work that's been done thus far?
Is that what's being shared on the screen right now?
Correct.
Yes, I see.
Okay, you kind of sound like you were in the car on a ride, so that's why I want to make sure. So maybe we'll give Tony 2 minutes to review so that he can.
Sure. So Tony, just a brief sort of recap of where we are. We started out with a conversation. I know you had responded earlier by email to whether we would just sort of talk about priorities right now and then talk about goals a little later, particularly since the Portrait of a Graduate work hadn't been completed, but the board felt it important that they do some sort of goal setting now. Although a lot of the things they're talking about in terms of goals are things that probably would have been a priority. So we're kind of fitting into both. We started out talking in general about, if you look at the first page, safety was a prime concern of everyone. Flexibility, you can read as well as I can read, I guess, but there was really a focus on not losing anything going forward, but making progress. We then, after everyone spoke, the board decided they did want to do goal setting. So we started a conversation trying to get some priorities down on what people wanted to focus on. I've started to kind of color code them in terms of there's one about resources, looking to work more efficiently, other sources of revenue like the Business Academy tuition. Looking at the efficiency, or my word effectiveness, I prefer that word, but that's, I'm not going to edit too much. We'll end up with the word you choose, of the administration, whether or not the administration have all the resource and tools they need to be successful was actually the conversation. Talking about, did somebody, okay. So, well, just a couple more. Culture and climate definitely has to be a different color because that was part of the socialization, social emotional. But an important conversation about diversity and inclusion. We still had a couple I haven't placed, but the whole idea of the fact that children can't necessarily learn if they are struggling with emotional or family issues or whatever, so that had to remain a priority. Mental health and those types of things, SRBI, and there was a general sense that we all recognize there has to be some flexibility in all this. One thing that I asked everybody, and we were sort of working around that, was, are we talking about the maintenance of quality instruction, or would goals be more focused on expectations of student achievement? While they're connected, one is the outcome of one is ensuring that teachers receive the tools they need, that they can teach effectively no matter what medium they're forced to use, and that could change at a moment's notice. Or what, and quite frankly, I usually steer people away from those types of goals because I would rather see goals talk about we want to see improved reading or we want to see improved writing. I want the focus to be on learning. In this situation, I'm not doing that because I think there needs to be a little of both, because it's hard to set high expectations when we're not sure how we're going to deliver them or ask the staff to develop plans for that. But that's kind of where I think the conversation was going to start to go now. So what I would ask you, sir, is if you would perhaps share with us some of the things, and without even necessarily reading off of this, what you think the priorities ought to be for this year, and share your thoughts, because you've missed a lot and would like to hear, you have lost a chance to say a lot. So I want to give you that chance.
All right, thank you. And again, my apologies for the tardiness. I think, and you hit on it just a second ago, Nick, and I think it was something that I said in my email. I would think in times right now where everything is so convoluted, that putting those clear-cut goals, those expectations out there becomes even more important. That while I understand, I don't remember if it was yourself or if it was Dr. Willett that was saying that, without really knowing how the teachers are going to present their information, without knowing the environment that the students are going to be in, that it's really difficult to set goals. And I think that's where I've got to slightly disagree. I think that's where these goals then become the medium, they become that lens that we can use to try to identify the various, where things start to get convoluted, then our overarching goal becomes how we focus that. You know, just to go back to what you were saying a few minutes ago when we're talking about setting goals that focus on increased learning, setting goals that focus on providing what our teachers need. You know, our goal should not say that, and I'm going to be somewhat facetious here, but it should not say that every teacher will have the number of pencils that they need. It may say that every teacher will have the resources available to deliver that, that education. And if in a month delivering that education requires an online component, then the lens of that goal helps define what our action should be. And that's where I see goals being somewhat high, being somewhat, to use the phrase pie in the sky, to be able to give us that thing to reach for, to be able to give us, the ways to improve. The thing I fear coming out of, when we finally emerge out the other side of the pandemic and everything returns to what we'll say with air quotes normal, is that we've lost the opportunity to improve while doing this. We've identified that there are things within our system that need to be worked on, that we can work on, even in these current situations. And our goal should reflect that. I rambled a bit.
Tony, it's very rumbly. I don't know what is making it so rumbly today, but
Better?
that is better.
My crickets have turned into road noise today, so.
Oh, okay. That's why I thought you were in a car initially. Okay. Makes sense.
Nick, you're muted, I think.
Yes, I am. Thank you. I could go on for a half hour like that. You just, well, okay. So what I haven't heard anybody talk about tonight was specific areas of academic need that might result in a goal in normal times. We're having a different conversation tonight because we are in different times. My aspiration when I do goal setting with boards is normally, what are the academic areas you want to see improve? Back to what several of you said, the measurable goals, about where we want to see improvement in teaching and learning. What I'm hearing tonight is a lot of improving, and for all the right reasons, but improving resources, improving climate, which does lead to instruction, but some of these may be harder to measure. But you've hit on a lot of the areas that the school district is going to have to focus on this year. I'm going to ask everybody, because I think we should talk about it, if any of you have areas of academic need that you've been watching, and we did talk about diversity and inclusion as one of those areas, because I think that's direct curriculum impact. But are there other, I want to at least have the conversation, and then you decide, well, you know what, given everything we're dealing with, that's enough. But are there particular areas of academics that you've been concerned about or think would be the benefit of the district that maybe should be talked about as a goal?
Rini has her hand up, so we'll go to Rini first.
So I would like to say that the reason that I haven't brought up anything specific is because to date, since I've been on the board, we have not had a presentation about student achievement. So it's difficult to say that we're doing well here, we're not doing so well here, so I'd like to focus on this or that, because there's been a variety pack of maybe reasons why. We've talked about the budget a lot, we've had to circle back to the budget. So there was that, then the pandemic hit and so forth. So I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying the reason that I haven't brought it up is I need to get the baseline, like, well, where are we? And then be able to say, okay, from my perspective, this is maybe an area that should be focusing on or something of that nature. So, and there's other people on the board who've been on the board longer, so maybe they have more of a background on and have had some of those presentations. But so far, I think myself and probably the other board members who are new really haven't had that education, for lack of a better term.
And I will interject that Dr. Willett shared the administration goals the last time, and a lot of that work went into those. One of the things I would love to talk to you about as we go forward is how can we come up with a better system of goal setting that allows the board to have this conversation more in conjunction with the administration, so it's not two concurrent workflows that kind of hopefully come together, and with skill they will come together. Your staff will make sure of that. But is there a better way of having one stream of work that incorporates both? And we can't do that now, but we have a year to do it for next time if you're inclined to think that might be something to talk about. But there has been some work done on that, and I probably feel a little remiss myself in not working with that a little more with you, other than what several of you have said, that you're doing all this ongoing work with Portrait of a Graduate, and that may be when you need that conversation. Out of all that work, how does that inform us as to where we want to set goals for student achievement?
In a typical year, I would give you a presentation on the school improvement goals and plans in the summertime, using some of the data that Nick's referring to, and giving you kind of positional data about where we are on relative measures. That would typically happen at the tail end of a year or in the summertime. So it all just got kind of thrown off, and this being the first year for many of you. I can still do that. It's such a typical part of the process that it never made it onto our future agenda items, I think, as an item officially, because it's just typically something I would always do. So I'm happy to do it at any time the board wants, but there are a lot of data-driven goals. The other thing to keep in mind is administrators are, under the administrator evaluation plan, under the Connecticut evaluation plan, they're evaluated by the superintendent, and their goals are 45% of their evaluation. So it's tied up very distinctly into their evaluation process. So some aspect of it, the board carries the football some down the field, but in terms of working directly with admin on their goals, that's typically where I come in.
Dr. Willett, I just have a question for you, because it says somebody's waiting in the waiting room, someone named Kate Vallow. Is that somebody that I can just admit?
Yeah, because this is a public meeting, so definitely, yes. Yeah, you have to.
All right. Well, she's
a huge troublemaker. No, don't let Kate Vallow in. No, she's such a troublemaker.
So that may help answer my own question, but I did want to at least raise this as something to talk about. There are a few hands up, Ashley. I don't know whether you want.
I was going to keep going. I didn't know exactly if you had something to throw in there, or because I'll keep going down the line. So, Kate?
Just wanted to address a couple of things. In terms of a specific reading or math goal, that really, to me, that seems to be more the work of the administration, in terms of like the principals, and then, the next levels down. I do just want to point out that, SBAC testing, SAT testing, all of the tests that we would have had this year to create that data presentation, that just didn't happen. So that kind of isn't a thing that we can necessarily look at. We can certainly look at historical data. That's all over the place. And if you guys need me to send you links so you can find that, I can do that, or Dr. Willett can do it. I mean, anybody. It's public information. But there was another thing that I wanted to say. Goals data. I'll remember it. It'll come back.
Yeah.
I'm gonna-
Well, and just to add to that, if you're going to make any assessment goals, we should have a conversation about what assessment is.
Yes, I remember what I was going to say.
What it is
Yeah.
and isn't.
I agree. Yes, we should be talking about what assessment is, with especially inside of the mastery learning program that Tolland has. The thing that I was going to say had to do with the fact that we are going to have some curriculum. Can you tell me the title again, Dr. Willett? Curriculum supervisors.
Are you talking about their professional titles?
Yeah, they're professional titles.
Yeah, they are curriculum supervisors.
Okay,
So they're
great.
curriculum supervisors, math, science, and ELA. The
So
district
they will be coming in to do presentations for us October, November, and I think December, January. So that is happening through the curriculum committee. Just wanted to let you know that, Rainey. That's it.
Okay, let's go to Jacob.
So I guess when it comes to the topic of improving certain areas, there are a lot that we've talked about. I know math was an area that some people were interested in, and I'm sure Christine's got her hand up. She'll probably talk more about that. But one area I did want to mention that we talked a little bit about the last meeting that Nick was here, that I would still like to do a bit more research into, maybe in conjunction with Portrait of the Graduate, is just to see how we are preparing students who might be interested in a vocational career. That's an area that I think there's certainly room to expand upon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Griffin?
So I wasn't going to talk about math, but since Jacob brought it up, actually, I'm actually more curious, Nick. So kind of going back to what Rini said, we haven't gotten the more official Board of Ed presentations. So my only view is as a parent, do we not want to discuss that in this? So that I guess that would be a little bit more of the Jacob aspect, because I will gladly sit it out as my parent views on what I think should be a Board of Ed goal as far as specific curriculum or specific subjects. Or
I guess the question kind of got answered by the fact that when I said what are the things that are pressing, that those weren't the topics that first rose to the top. And I'm thinking out loud, and again, I'm trying to be a facilitator, not lead you, but guide you. But I just kind of sympathize with the idea that the Portrait of the Graduate is going to be focusing on what we want to see. And my assumption is that many of and a much broader group, will be looking at and sharing information with you on where are the areas that we believe the community, what we need our children to learn in order to be successful. So I'm wondering if it's premature to have that conversation now, but to continue that conversation after that report is out and you have time to review it, and to have the staff review it and share their views on what the data show as well. So I asked the question, but perhaps it was more of a rhetorical question. I wanted people to have a chance if they really like the vocational. I think that's a topic that is really critical. It's probably going to figure into the Portrait of a Graduate quite a bit. I'd be shocked if it wasn't. So even that might not be time to focus on that as a goal now, but be prepared, Jacob, to bring that up when you have those conversations after that report comes out, because I think that would be important to have. By the way, I put in a pitch that I was a plumbing contractor for 12 years. And if I didn't know math and science and reading and writing and communication skills and all that other stuff, I would have been a pretty terrible businessman. So those are skills that you are probably better able to provide to a child going into a vocational setting than some of the VOTEC schools, because an employer will teach them how to, they don't solder anymore, but they could teach you how to solder or do all these other tasks, but they can't, the contractor can't teach you math, reading, writing, and all those other important things that you can. So, but that's, I think, when you'd have that conversation, if that makes sense.
Okay, let's go to, and I'm assuming Griffin, you're all set? You're good?
Yes, I will save my stuff for after Portrait of a Graduate.
Okay. Tony?
And again, you know, it sounds like, and I want to tie in a bit, I think Rini threw the question up there nicely with, and Dr. Willett kind of keyed on it very, very well too. Thank you both. When you're saying that, you know, under normal circumstances, we'd have had the briefs, we'd have had the information, we'd know what we didn't know, for lack of a better term. And while I completely agree that Portrait of a Graduate is one of the things that's coming up that we need to complete to be able to answer that question, when we're sitting here trying to define our goals and say what we, you know, where we feel we need to apply the proper energy, the fact that Portrait of a Graduate keeps coming up, doesn't it by nature then become something that our goals need to articulate? That we have this question that Rini brought up, we have a potential solution in the Portrait of a Graduate, but that we as a board feel that we need to at least apply some energy to ensuring that we're meeting the needs of these students going forward, that Portrait of a Graduate does scratch the itch, that there's not additional things that we need to be watching, measuring, and adjusting vector to ensure that we're there, that at the end of the year, we've achieved what we want. My fear is that, Nick, if we keep kicking the can down the road and we keep saying that this is not a conversation we should have now, but instead we should have after ... we're never actually going to have the conversation. We're never actually going to realize when we've achieved what we are trying to achieve because we never defined it.
So I'm going to ask you back, how do you envision, did I hear you sort of articulate the idea that the goal ought to be to make sure the Portrait of a Graduate actually makes something happen?
I think the goal should be bigger. The goal should be what something happening is. And Portrait of a Graduate is the tool that we're using to get there.
Right, but the part of it is Portrait of a Graduate will help define what the is, not to use a term from a previous politician, but you know, it'll help define that for you, which is why you're in a bit of a conundrum or a stuck spot, because you got the global pandemic. Most of the standardized measures were canceled this year. Not that the state's questioning whether certain standardized measures were valuable at all, and they're starting to reevaluate that. There are many measures like Dibblesdorf days and kinds of universal type screens that you could do things with. But you know, one of my goals will be students recover any lost, any lost content or any, anything that was lost over the March, April, May zone. One of my goals with the admin will be to recover that learning and get it back all up to grade level for all kids, for all students that, don't have an IEP or PPT, scheduled goals that are different. But, this year is all about just trying to make sure we don't lose a lot, social and emotionally, academically, that kind of thing, and recover from the impact that happened from March to June. So that's the conundrum there is, the typical ones don't fit the mold, and you don't have the other stuff yet. That should take a few months to finish. And in a year, a Portrait of a Graduate thing would be enough work by itself outside of an entire, pandemic learning program. So it's just keeping it all in within the scope of what's realistic, and reasonable is going to be a challenge, I think.
But I guess, Dr. Willett, just to kind of, and I've read the documentation that you have online for Portrait of a Graduate, and I think it's, you set off down that path with somewhat clear ideas of where you want that to be. I know you and I have talked numerous times about it, and I think it's a wonderful thing. But without that goal that led you that direction, saying if what we're relying on now is Portrait of a Graduate to go forth on its current trajectory, and the solution is then what we'll set our goal for, rather than shouldn't our goals that we set here help provide the boundaries that acts within?
Well, I guess it's all because people haven't seen this before. the idea of Portrait of a Graduate is to transcend the boundaries that would typically be given, that might be put in place by 9 people versus the perhaps 100 people Portrait of a Graduate would touch. So it's sort of like you have been robbed of the ability to make to really look and absorb what the end result will be of the Portrait of a Graduate by the current conditions we're in. Because if you had that and the time and the whole thing had been different, you would be having a totally different conversation right now, guided by a lot of input from many, many different parties and many different factions as part of the Portrait of Graduate. So I'm just saying, as you enter into that process, I'm hoping to get it wrapped up by December, January, but I don't even know what we're going to be doing. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 4 months. So, you got to take into consideration that the next 4 months might have some significant variability in it with respect to getting people in the same room, to do certain work.
And I completely agree. I think we're saying similar things. You wouldn't, regardless of what happens in the next few months, would you anticipate that the final product of Portrait of a Graduate would change?
No. Hoping that I can get people to the table and they're not afraid, you know what I mean? Afraid to participate, for instance, in person. Some of that work is really great in person.
I'm totally with you. And that's what I'm trying to point out there is whether it takes 2 months because you're in the same room, or it takes longer than that because you're having to do some creative stuff, due to these COVID restrictions. Ultimately, you see Portrait of a Graduate getting to a place and providing a certain product. Now, if our goals that we're setting here, which are intended to guide, which are intended to take into consideration the hundreds of people rather than the 9, like you said there, our goal should help get us to that point. Now, if we've got issues with how we do that between now and then we need to raise that goal up higher where it can still provide that direction without getting caught up in the logistical weeds.
So let me ask a question, Tony, because I've had the luxury of working with several districts. Waterbury was one of them, where they were a little further along in the Portrait of a Graduate work, and they had then brought their report to the board to sort of share with them, here's what we believe students, just the rough draft, basically, not even maybe just the critical areas they were focused on, but it helped the board understand the work. So that, and I guess, I'm not sure whether I'm misunderstanding you or not, and I could be, but in my mind, the outcomes that you're looking for, I think, will be articulated in that Portrait of a Graduate, rather than you articulating expectations and hoping that the Portrait of a Graduate will be the roadmap to get there. That will help identify the priorities, and then it'll be Dr. Willett's job, his staff, and your job to figure out how do we get there. The means, what is the ends to the means? The means is the result of that work, but what do we need to do to get there will be your work and the administration's work. So, well, let me, because I see the time is 8:30 already, and I was hoping we could avoid another session, and there's several people with the little blue hands up, and I want to give them a chance to speak. Is there an agreement amongst folks that one of the goals should be, we won't word it yet, but supporting the Portrait of a Graduate work to its completion and support its implementation?
Can we take a vote on that? Or something? I don't know.
Action, but certainly if people object by voicing that, would get a sense of who didn't agree.
Okay.
Let's do a straw poll then. Let's just go through and, are you in agreement with?
You're not making a permanent decision. You're just looking at a draft. So yeah, straw poll.
Exactly. So Jacob,
The idea of supporting Portrait of Graduate, I'd say that's a goal idea I'd support.
Hey, Plord?
Absolutely.
Griffin?
Yeah, I agree.
Tony?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Rainey?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so it's unanimous to put that as one of the goals.
Okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Was that question to support Portrait of a Graduate work to its completion? Did I miss anything on that?
I threw some words out, but said we would worry about articulating it more specifically after, but that we can at least get this one off the table and say we've accomplished an agreement on something. Once I'm hoping that we could identify 2 or 3 key areas, and since we had scheduled one more session, it might be that that's where we try to articulate the actual language, but let's at least walk out of here agreeing on what the major areas are.
Okay, I'm just the clerk, so I just want to confirm that the question for the straw poll was that it was an agreement to support the Portrait of a Graduate work to its completion, and that was the only question.
Well, they were in agreement that that should be one of the goals. That
Thank you very much. Okay.
we draft what that language will look like, but that's a goal.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Dana, you've had that little blue hand up for the longest time, so you're probably champing at the bit.
Always. No. First of all, Lisa, you're not just a clerk. So,
You're sweet. Thank you.
I guess, I mean, I know some of the questions that was kind of some of the conversation that was up was we can't necessarily pick a goal or create a goal based on information that we haven't been provided. And obviously, we're kind of in a very precarious and odd position that anybody in any board or any employer or anything walk of life right now is in. So I think there's a lot of things that we're all approaching first. So to help me kind of grapple all this and put my arms around all of it and make a good educated decision on what I'd like to support for our goals, I'd like to, and I know Karen isn't here, but we have Dr. Willett and Kate and Christina that are here that are from the previous board. And I guess I would kind of like to hear, and I don't know if we have enough time to do this or if we get some highlights of the previous Board of Ed's goals and why those specific goals were chosen. I think that might help steer us a little bit with their previous interactions with Dr. Willett and the Board of Ed. I mean, I want to hear from Dr. Willett, Christina, and Kate, if that's okay, so I can get a little bit more backstory on some of the previous board's goals. I think that'll help us because sadly, I don't want to push this off or push off a goal because we're not necessarily educated on all the backstory of presentations that we would have received due to the global pandemic. I don't think it's just for our faculty, our staff, and our students. I'm just trying to assist us a little bit more to push this along. So I don't want to put anybody on the spot, Christina, Kate, or Dr. Willett, but I would hope you wouldn't mind sharing some of your thoughts on the previous board's goals.
I can go. So the last goal setting session that we did, I believe the communications committee had come up with a list and we did a Google form, I believe, and prioritized them. I did feel that there was just a lot of support, and I don't remember them all. There was a bunch, but there was supporting Portrait of a Graduate, but there was nothing measurable on there. And that was my problem with the previous board goals. But I have no problem having a goal that supports things. I think we just have to know what it is we're actually supporting in the sense of having it be measurable, like supporting Portrait of a Graduate to completion. That's a measurable goal to me, knowing that Dr. Willett and his team will complete it. The board will know about it, will be part of the process, and incorporate that into our goals in the future. Did that help, Dana?
Sort of. I mean, I guess, and I don't know if it's a conversation we have tonight or maybe it's something that you, and I don't want to give anybody homework, but I mean, to kind of help and get an idea of, the goals and say, this is why we chose this goal, and this is why we chose this goal, this is why we chose, like a quick highlight, or these were important to the previous board, and it might be something we want to talk about, because I know that this is not all going to get decided tonight, I'm sure, as Nick has said. But it might give some of us newer folks or as rookies a little bit of guidance and insight on what the team of 9 prior to us were thinking about goals for the district and the students of Tolland.
I mean, I could, we had a brief thing of the history of the goals last time, but we didn't get deeply into the last board. I mean, I could give you I have all of the materials that were used at that time. It was like April 11th. It started, and April 26th, there was a brainstorming activity, then a ranking activity, and then ultimately from those ranking activities, narrowed down to the core priority or the most well supported goals from the board. And there was a session of what does it mean to achieve, what is the measure of success for this goal. So there are some data sheets that were originally used back when they were done that were what I call indicators of success. I call them, we use the terminology of an indicator of success or an IOS. That's usually some target. It's a data-driven SMART goal target that says, yes, we achieved this, or no, we did not. But that was back in roughly 1819, where that was done that thoroughly. So, I mean, I can go through a presentation on that if you want. We never did go through that particular presentation.
Can I just interrupt? I'm sorry. Well, we already went through the history during one of the previous goal setting sessions, and I believe you included the minutes. I think Nick was on the call, and I think I'd like to move forward as a board with our future goals and not look at the past. To be honest with you,
I think if you could, I can just to move on and go past it. I could show you this one thing, Nick, if you wanted me to share the screen to it, and then you can move on. But it just kind of shows a generalized format, and then you could go from there. It's what Dana, I think Dana asked. It just is the one document that would probably give her the answer to the question she just asked.
I just made you the host.
Okay.
This is Dana again. Do you mind if I chime back in? Do you mind?
Well,
I don't mind. I'll put this up real quick.
I just want to clarify what my question was, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not, and Christina, I'm not trying to look backwards. Of course, you always want to move forward, but my question was more so the goals of the previous Board of Ed. Can you afford me and give me some context of why they were chosen? This Board of Ed has not had the opportunity to receive a lot of the intel or information due to the pandemic on things that were important. And whether it was 2 years or 4 years or 3 years ago, those were critically important to a Board of Education in the Tolland Public School System. And we have resources of 3 very strong, intelligent people, 2 board members and our superintendent. And I was asking for some context based upon the decisions of the previous Board of Ed's goal setting. I don't think that when you flip a Board of Ed, all of a sudden all the goals change. I think there are some goals that will still stay there. I think there are some goals that obviously are very paramount to the success of Tolland Public School System. And I was just asking for a little bit of your thoughts and your insight, and trying to educate myself on your thought process and the previous board's thought process, and in those kind of things. Yes, I can probably grab it from the minutes, but I wanted us to work as a team to hear your perspective, because I respect that perspective of the previous board members and our superintendent. And that was really my question, not to be referred to minutes, so I can make an educated decision on all of this. That's kind of where I was at. And I'm sorry if my question wasn't clear. Of course, we always want to be forward thinking and moving forward, but it also helps to know some historical information as well.
Yeah, I don't want, and to be clear, I don't want to, and I'm not sure you took it that way or not, Dana, but I didn't want to insinuate you should look back or that we did it last time or anything like that. I want to provide you with what you were asking. So.
I'm not saying that at all, Dr. Willett.
Okay.
I was just hoping to bend your ear a little bit, because
sure.
I appreciate your opinion and respect your opinion, and that's all. Sometimes it's different hearing it from, and again, that's why I didn't mean to put Kate or Christina or you on the spot. It was just something that I was trying to get a little bit of insight from the folks who have been around for a little bit longer than I.
Yeah, well,
That's
so
all.
this document might give you a sense of what, the last time that I did it with the board, we did a set of prioritization stages, and then this was one of a series of prioritization stages. So this is how it used to look, more or less. And at the time, SMART goals are sometimes something that people are not used to doing unless they've been trained on. So you might have noticed the SMART goals for the administrators that I use for their evaluations are much more granularly data centric. This amount of improvement, or this particular percentage increase, or this group will improve by X amount in Y months. That type of thing is kind of getting into more of the application on the ground stuff. And that the board tend to be more comfortable with indicators of success they felt they could achieve as a board. So this was what was sort of part of the previous landscape. And then, that's where you get the, relevant brainstormed items, proposed indicators of success, and ultimately the general comprehensive, category, that type of thing. And then this is what your goals, they, when it finally ended, this was always published with the agenda, but this didn't represent the indicators of success. There was more under the hood, but this is what was public. To make it short and sweet, I think this is what ended up being on agendas, and that's what people associated most. But the iOSs were in there for a while, and then we had a couple of that weird sort of year.
Dr. Willett, just a quick question. Can you make this available on the Google Drive?
Yeah, I think a lot of docs on the history are on the Google Drive. I can definitely make this particular one there too, this one that I worked through with them. I think it's up there somewhere in the listing of things, but I'll add it and I'll make it at the top right now, if that would help.
Dana, would that be okay with you, with just having it on that Google?
Absolutely. And I might email directly like Kate and Karen and Christina just to answer some questions, because again, and Dr. Willard, I didn't mean to put you on the spot by any means, so please don't take it that way.
No, not at all. I just want to make sure.
I'm appreciative of this, but sometimes I'd like to hear the feelings and the passion and the context behind what's put on paper, so I can educate myself a little bit more. That was more of what my question is, and I didn't mean to make it this really big thing. I was kind of hoping it would be more helpful for us to kind of get our arms around tangible goals. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Dr.
Sure. And I'll end the sharing. And Nick, do you want it back?
Yeah, well, I'd like to pop in for just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. No worries. So, like, if you looked at the goals, you could see that they were about efficiencies, they were about curriculum, they were about the strategic prevention framework is actually having to do with mental health and also substance abuse. And then again, more fiscal responsibility. I mean, 3 out of these 8 goals are about fiscal responsibility, and then instructional technology. So, like, there's a lot of crossover. And so just, our primary job is to make sure that the quality of education is there. And so sometimes we also have to look at, how can we support that? And that's what those goals also did. So I just wanted to pop in and say my piece about the goals. They are what they are, and they're, I always think that it's good for us to have the context. Thank you.
All right. So
Claire's hand's still up. Claire, do you have something, or is that an old blue hand?
I was just hoping to circle back around to define some concrete goals from our list.
okay, I'm gonna change over to Nick.
Because I've been typing something up.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Nick, let me give this over to you. There we go.
I might have clicked too soon. I'm still disabled.
Yeah, it's not. Hold on, it's fighting me, but we're getting it back. We're getting it over to you. Here we go. You should be a host.
All right. Yes, indeed. Okay.
Okay.
So I started to type some things up based on what you all agreed to or had brought up, and we had sort of prioritized. There's a few things left out. We have a little time to try to prioritize this a bit better. There was agreement about a goal on Portrait of a Graduate. Just for a placeholder, I put in ensure the completion and implementation of the Portrait of a Graduate. Whether that would say incorporated into the curriculum and instruction, we could worry about fine tuning the words, but the intent of it was to ensure that not only is that work completed, but that you as a board and administration working together will ensure that it becomes real, that it's implemented. Now, if anybody disagrees with my interpretation of that, I mean, again, we'll worry about the language later, but is that the sense of what you thought we were talking about?
Can you repeat that again, please, Nick? I'm sorry.
I just wrote ensure the completion and implementation of the Portrait of a Graduate. And that gets to Tony's concern about we got it, but what does that mean? We're not just saying we want to see it done, but we want to see it implemented. And we can fine tune the language, but I'm seeing either nodding heads or at least people aren't throwing things at the screen. Okay.
I think that's pretty close to what the straw poll had said. So,
yep. Second one, and this would incorporate a lot of things like SRBI, social, emotional, et cetera, but maintain the culture and climate conducive to high levels of teaching and learning. Now, that could be changed to add more concern about health and welfare or mental health. Well, one I think is the social emotional. Let's leave that as the descriptor for now. But does that, whatever the language is, does that rise to what several of you said was an important thing to focus on this year, given the struggles our kids and our staff are going through? I'm hearing no objections. And I'm seeing some thumbs up. Okay, good. And then we had, as we always have to have a goal about stuff, there was a lot of talk about efficiency, looking for other sources of revenue, tuition, et cetera, et cetera. But the goal seems to be to provide the resources necessary to ensure quality, instruction, learning, services. I'll look for your help for the word, but does that rise to the level? We have to have one about all this. You talked about that right up front. So it's obviously on everybody's minds. We know it's going to be hard to pay for all the stuff we're going to need to do this year. But given that, is the goal to provide resources, and that might be, and that in my mind includes alternate sources, alternate uses, et cetera, et cetera. This is the broad goal.
I feel like that has to be more specific, that it does include things other than the traditional tax and,
yep.
That we want to say alternative resources, or at least, investigate alternative resources, implement something. Yes.
I'm just putting this in again as a placeholder, including non-traditional sources of revenue. That really opens the door to a whole bunch of different things. Maybe too much. I don't know. As I say, I'm just trying to read you all and trying to figure out language that will fit into what you've been talking about.
I think it's fine at this stage in the game, and we can, like you said, fine tune the wording up on all of these.
Yep. Now, the other area that there was quite a bit of animation on all of your part when it was brought up, the issue of diversity and inclusion was up there. So I throw that out as a question to all of you. And this time I'm going to ask some of you, what do you think that goal might look like if that was a goal of the district?
Tony has his hand up, but I'll go if
Yeah, Tony has his hand up. I had to mute myself. I was sneezing, so.
So, isn't that covered in goal 2?
It could be. Sometimes boards that want special emphasis on a specific area may make a separate goal for that area. It could easily be incorporated into that other goal. I leave that kind of to you all to decide what makes most sense for you. I love 3 goals rather than 4, just because the fewer the better. But if enough of you felt, you know what, this is so important, it's on everybody's minds right now, we want to voice how important it is to us by having it as a separate goal, I could sympathize with that. But you could easily incorporate it into goal 2.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Tony?
Nope, not on that.
Pete?
I think we need it as a separate goal. It's not just about culture and climate. Diversity and inclusion also has to do with curriculum. It has to do with social emotional status. I mean, it needs to be separate. If we're going to take it seriously, we have to make it separate. If you don't say it, you're not going to do it.
I'm seeing a couple of nods, but a lot of inactivity. Some other comments about that? Oh, thumbs up.
Chris. We got Plord.
I wouldn't have a problem with it being a separate goal. I just don't know how it would be articulated. Kate had given an example, but no, I'd be open to it. I think it's important for it to stand alone in this society.
Can I give you some words?
Please.
Create a diverse and inclusive community where every member is acknowledged, respected, and has the necessary resources to thrive.
You might have to go slower, Kate.
Yeah.
Okay. Create a diverse and inclusive community where every member is acknowledged, respected, and has the necessary resources to thrive.
Again, as far as a misspelled acknowledged.
ACKNOWLEDGED.
That's how I fix that.
Acknowledged, respected, and has the necessary resources to thrive. Obviously, this is a placeholder. It's just something that we can use. I could bring in some other examples too when we go to work on this.
Like that. People have, do people see this as, I'm trying to word it properly, do they identify with the way that the goal has been stated, or do you have a different interpretation of what it might look like?
Nick, I'm not sure everybody heard you on that one. I know there's some kind of background sound, so I don't know if you want to restate.
Okay, well, I hope I can. So the way it's been worded, Kate worded, create a diverse and inclusive community where every member is acknowledged, respected, and has the necessary resources to thrive. Is that how you would frame this goal if you were writing it? I just want to get a consensus. Is this the right direction for this goal, or do other people interpret diversity inclusion in a different way?
Ash, if I could speak, I guess the only problem I would have with it is you can't really create a diverse and inclusive community. I think we can foster it, or I don't know what the proper word would be, but you can't force it, if you know what I mean.
Nurture.
But that's nurture.
I like nurture better.
I'll tell you what, we're going to do it this way so that we don't lose.
We could use the word support.
or nurture and encourage. So yeah, support, something like that.
It's Dana, and I just kind of want to, if I could tack onto this. I like all those words, create, nurture, support. But I also think maybe it could be, and I don't know how it works, or continue to develop, or it continue to expand, because I think the base is there. I think improvement needs, I know that Dr. Willett and they're working on adding additional resources and opportunities for diverse, inclusive community and resources. So I think it's there. A nurture, support, grow, develop. Not develop, because that's starting from fresh, right? And we're not starting fresh. We just need to continue to expand. I think that kind of context needs to be into this.
So if I could ask a question, I don't want to interrupt other thoughts, but is this, what I'm hearing here is we want to create a place where people feel safe. And yet, when I see the conversations about diversity and inclusion, they're usually more proactive, talking about racial justice or some of the other things that have been shown to be deficiencies in the way we have taught children in the past. And so I wonder, is this focused enough on, and again, these are your ideas, is the intention to create a community where everybody feels good about themselves, or is it to focus our attention on teaching children things that may be uncomfortable, but that they need to learn? I'm asking, you have the answers to that, but when I think of the term diversity and inclusion, it's beyond just the language I see here, and this may be your intent, and that's fine. So I would say, Christina, I've heard plural all night. So, I'm going to.
I'm sorry. I could also read the correct one and see if there's anything that we want to grab from there. It's an intentionally diverse social justice organization whose members work to acknowledge, respect, and empathize with people of all different identifiers, such as race, socioeconomic status, gender identity and expression, education, age, ability, ethnicity, culture, sexual orientation, language, nationality, and religion. So this one it's an intentionally diverse social justice organization whose members work to acknowledge, respect, and empathize with all people.
So comments from some of the rest of you about that?
Dana has her hand explored. Are you all set?
Oh, I thought Nick was going to ask me a question, so I unmuted. But yes, I'm all set.
Well, you had the hand up. That's why we were.
Oh, yes, I'm all set. Sorry.
Jacob?
Did you call me, Ashley?
Yes, Jacob.
Yes. So again, just keeping in mind that, these aren't finalized and these are kind of just broad categories we might look at. I think that right now I like the idea of nurture, support a diverse, inclusive community, et cetera, the way we have it. At this time, maybe we can work up on that more, but I think that's a longer discussion that we need to have, that we can't have all in this one meeting. So I like how it is right now.
Kate?
I hear that. I think that we do need to say something about race and identity in this statement. So an inclusive community where every member is acknowledged. Yeah, I'd like to get race. I'd like to get some kind of acknowledgement of, diversity. We don't, well, it's kind of, there's a lot to say here, but I'm looking forward to some action steps that will just, really flesh this out and make this happen. After listening to the students at the Voices from Our Schools, they are clamoring for something to happen here. and they feel as though they need it in order to be a fully, functioning member of society. So I want to honor that, and I want to make sure that we do what we can to really push ourselves on this. So I don't know if you want to put something like include statement about race and gender expression in there, just as like a reminder to us for later. Thank you.
Dana.
Yes, I'd like to kind of piggyback on what Jacob had said about continuing the conversation of this. I definitely think that we're not going to iron this all out tonight for sure. I would like, Kate, if you wouldn't mind sending that correct excerpt that you said. I think it's super important that not only are we talking about what's going on right now in our culture and our climate and even in our town of Tolland, it's across the nation, it's across the world, and it's here. So it's paramount, again, that the voices meeting that we had last week or the week before, as Kate has said, that we have community members screaming for support and pushing for support and looking for continued educational services of equity and equality. So I definitely think number 4, if we can get a little bit more information, Kate, if you could send some more stuff, that'd be awesome. But I definitely think that this needs to be fine-tuned to ensure that we are equitable in number 4, for sure.
Absolutely. Coming to you now.
Thank you.
Let's go to Griffin.
One thing I'm concerned about, number 1. So reading all these goals, I absolutely agree with all of them. I'm still concerned, and maybe it's because we haven't finished the portrait of a graduate, but I'm still not seeing anything about academics. So that's just concerning to me. And just, I had pulled a while ago, I think this is Windsor. I'm not sure if it's Windsor or Windsor Locks. But, their first goal was all students will demonstrate a strong work ethic, exemplary academic skills, effective oral and written communications, technological aptitude, and necessary skills to work collaboratively with others. I'm wondering, are we going to expand on the portrait of a graduate goal once we have more of the portrait of a graduate finished, and that goal 1 will change a little bit, or what? This is my question.
I think that's the case.
I like it, Christine. Would you mind sending? I like what you read. I definitely think that.
Okay, yeah, I'll might just take a screenshot and text it to you.
Yeah, I think that we can learn from our brothers and sisters for sure. This is Dana. Lisa, sorry, I chimed in on not my turn. I like it, Christine. I like it a lot.
Just so you know, for reference, I think that is Windsor, and I helped them do those about 10 years ago, and they've revised them and changed them periodically. But the way Windsor works, that they have like 3 or 4 overarching goals. There's a student achievement goal. There was, I think, health and wellness goal, but they focused on 4 overarching goals that didn't change year to year. Those remained. And then maybe every 5 years, 3 or 4 years, 5 years, they might review them, change a few words, but those are up on their boardroom walls and they refer to them all the time. And then aside from that, they come up with annual goals, and the superintendent comes up with goals that all align to those. Okay. So rather than we're going to do goals every year, well, they still do that, but the goals you're referencing are really more those broad overarching goals, like a strategic plan, the 4 goals or 5 goals that you might have in a strategic plan, and then that drives an additional set of work afterwards. But they've really abided by that. There are a lot of boardrooms that have goals like that on the walls and they never even look at them. But in Windsor, I know they really spend a lot of time focusing on that work. So again, this might be something down the road, I mentioned at the beginning that I think that there could be a better process where you and your administration are working together to set up a set of goals rather than trying to dovetail two, I won't call them competing sets of goals, but done almost in absentia from each other. So is there a better way of being aligned down the road? But that might be something we talk about at a future time. But that's just some history on those, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Let's go to Jay. But I know Rini said that she had a 9 o'clock, but she had to leave. So Rini, it's 9:08.
I gotta go. Yeah, I gotta go.
Before you
So-
go, here's my suggestion for our next session, and I'm going to give you all a little homework. I know somebody said at the beginning there will be no homework, but we've got 4 potential goals written down. Take some time and look at them and see if you can come up with language that you're comfortable with that might be a goal in that area. And if we all share those the next time, I suspect we'll come up with a consensus on a set of goals pretty quickly, based on, and except for that 4th one where we could have that rich conversation that you want to have about what diversity and inclusion may look like. So that's for Rennie's benefit, so she can leave and know what we're all going to ask the rest of you to do. But are people okay with that? So that she doesn't leave with homework and nobody else does it?
I say give Rini homework.
Can you send that to all the members? That way we can have that and everyone can just kind of review everything that was done.
I'm going to share this with Dr. Willett tomorrow morning. Make sure, or probably tonight, I'll email it to him, and then he can share it with all of you, and you'll have that for reference.
Okay, perfect. I see Jacob still has his hand up, so they,
I want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, this is just a quick thing. Yeah, I was just wondering before you could share it, if maybe we could color code the goals with the same color you were using for the corresponding points, just in case we don't get to look at it for a couple of days, we can kind of see where our minds were with goals.
It's a great idea.
I love color coding.
And Christine Griffin, and everybody, I just wanted to tell you all that I shared with you the portrait of graduate stuff, so you can kind of take a look at it, so you feel maybe a little bit better about goal 1, addressing curriculum, because I do believe that the portrait of graduate will have this baked in. So I just want to, I re-forwarded that to everybody, so it's there.
Thank you.
No worries.
Great. Well, folks, I feel like we reached a resolution for the evening, at least. Ashley, do you have any?
I agree. I agree. There's a lot of stuff going on in my house right now, but yes, I would agree. So I think we're in a good spot. We'll have this sent out to all the members so that everyone can review it, think about the language. And therefore, at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Jacob Murray, I move that we adjourn this Board of Education meeting 9:11 p.m.
8HB, second.
We need one.
And Kate seconded.
Kate just seconded.
I just heard two things. Any discussion? Oh, okay. All those in favor, you can say aye, and any opposed can say nay. And if you have any abstentions, have to do the roll call. Jacob.
Aye.
Claude.
Aye.
Griffin.
Aye.
Tony.
Aye.
Dana.
Aye.
Kate.
Aye.
And I would agree as well. Therefore, it's unanimous. We will end the night. Nick, thank you very much for coming and doing.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks,
Thank
Thank you,
Nick.
Nick. Thank you, Dr. Willett. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Willett.
Great
Have a
night.
good evening, everybody.
Good night.
Aye.
Take care.
Dr. Willett, I made you host again so you could shut it down.
All right. Have a good night,
His
Nick.
favorite time of the night.
That's right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you, Nick. Take care.